Well, welcome to this live webinar, which is from Juro and all about how you can create contract magic and scale your legal workflow. This is a live webinar and has been recorded, and you're going to be sent a recording of the slides afterwards. We have a live Q&A going in Zoom, so please do note your questions as we go, and we're going to try and answer as many of them as we can at the end. So I'm Richard Mabey. I'm co-founder and CEO here at Juro, and I lead the team here, and will be presenting alongside two members from the Juro team. So first, we have Emily Zukauskas, who's a sales manager at Juro. Hi, Emily.
Hi, everyone. As Richard said, I'm the sales manager here at Juro, and my role is primarily focused on meeting with prospects in various stages of the sales cycle.
And we also have Josephine Henschke.
Hi everyone, great to have you at our webinar. So my role as onboarding managers to enable our customers and make sure they get to value.
So just very briefly, what does Juro do? So we're an end-to-end contract management platform. We work both with legal teams and business teams to improve contract process, to make it faster, but we also aim to give our customers more insight into contracts and make the entire process of agreeing contracts as collaborative as it can be. We're particularly focused on clean design and user experience. And we think this is important because it will help you as a legal team to deliver better adoption from the business, or as a business side user to essentially work in the way in which you work with your existing tools like Salesforce, Slack, and Greenhouse. And we think this ends up creating a better relationship between legal teams and the business. And between Josephine, who comes from a legal background, and Emily, who comes from a sales background, we want to cover as we go in this webinar those two different perspectives on contract management. So in order to kind of structure our demo, we're going to look at first what are the key pain points that businesses find with contracts. And this can broadly be brought across the contract life cycle. So covering the create phase, so when you're creating contracts, where often there'll be pain points around not being able to keep control of the right versions of templates, endless requests coming in over email for legal teams, and sometimes just the wrong data going into contracts. In the collaborate phase, we're, as former lawyers, all familiar with the email tennis that can go alongside the redlining process, both internally with your team and externally, and also not really having any proper system and audit trail for what's actually been agreed in contracts. At the agree phase, well, there's several risks that can happen. The wrong person can sign the contract, so we don't have authorized signatories. We've got the incorrect data actually being agreed, so it's the wrong contract essentially that's being signed. And also the process of chasing those signatories for especially sales teams, but also business side teams, can be painful. And then finally, at the back end of that process, once those contracts have been agreed, actually we find from our customers that they see, generally speaking, previous to Juro, limited data visibility, so not really having those data points like key dates for them to track, and equally just spending an awful lot of time searching for agreements and searching for contract clauses. So this is really where we see the pain in contracts. And in this webinar, what we want to show you through a live demo of Juro is how you can solve some of that pain and ensure that contract workflow is not just solved, but also scales with the business. And we're going to be covering 5 key areas. So firstly, we're going to have a look at how you can use the Juro templates library to actually scale high velocity agreements within your business on your own paper. We're going to look at how you can create contracts through a conversational interface, so via the Juro Q&A flow. And then we're going to look at the whole process of collaboration. So how can you collaborate with your colleagues and also with the other side to get to yes as quickly as you can. Now, as part of that process, approval workflow is something we increasingly see interest from our customers, especially structured approval processes from legal and finance. So we're going to cover that quickly too. And finally, we're going to look at that all-important experience for the people on the other side of contracts. So how you can deliver an experience that is not only going to help you to close that sale faster, but it's also going to help you deliver a great experience to that stakeholder. So this is what we're going to be covering as part of this. And I'm going to hand over to Josephine, who's going to start off with the Juro demo.
Hi guys again. So I'm very excited to show you now how we at Juro address one of the main pain points that Richard just addressed. And we're going to start with our template library. So as you can see, we store all of our templates together in one library, and this is great for legal counsels because you have full control of all the templates that are live in your workspace. So if we have a look at this NDA, for example, then we have full control as to what data goes in there, and we can make sure that everything is always up to date. And then when we publish it here, that's when actual users from our business can access this template and are able to use it for their contracts. If we keep it in edit mode, then nobody can access it. And this really means that the legal side of the business becomes the enabler and makes sure contracts are actually agreed faster, because nobody has to search for contracts anymore. Like you no longer need that email chain where your business asks you, is this the right version of the contract? You don't have the problem of wrong contracts being agreed from wrong templates and then having to go back and renegotiate. So this just really creates a great relationship between the teams and really addresses that problem that legal is not the bottleneck, but the enabler of the business. And in our template editor, you can see that this is not Word or any other tool. We have a custom built editor where you can just simply type or delete text. It's very intuitive, it's very easy to use, and you have all the tools you need to build contracts with nothing that would distract you. And then when I hit publish again, now all my teams can access this by creating contracts.
And just to kind of go back into the templates there, I mean, these fields here, we're going to kind of be addressing kind of what they are, and these can just be dragged and dropped straight into a template. But before we take that forward, just a question for Emily. I mean, from the sales perspective, so going away from legal, who are typically the owner of these templates, where have you found pain when you're trying to get hold of the right template?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, like personally, I love how easy it is to find the right template and just to have confidence that I'm getting it right the first time. I'm sure that a lot of salespeople can kind of sympathize with this, but I hate to admit it. It's happened to me before where I had to dig through my emails to find a Word version of a template that was sent to me and the rest of the sales team. I filled in the contract, sent it to the prospect, got it back signed. And then when I got it sent off to legal for countersigning, I found out that I had used the wrong version of the template and had to restart that whole process all over again. So that was not only embarrassing in front of the client, but it also took a ton of extra work for me to have to go back, redo the whole contract, and then it slowed down the sales cycle in the end.
And from a legal side, Josephine, so I think one of the pain points we sometimes hear is it is really hard to get these templates set up. I mean, how do you get these fields into this document?
Yeah, so one of the great things I find about Juro, coming from a legal background, is that you just save so much time setting up templates. So if we just hit the edit mode, as you can see, you have like a smart field menu on the right side. So you can just add them very quickly, give them a name, and then drag and drop them anywhere you need them. And this is just so useful because then you connect them to a conversational Q&A and get all that data set up. And you can just make changes as you go. And this is just a very intuitive and fast way to get your templates set up as you want them.
So no engineering time, self-serve templates for legal and enabling the business.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we'll move on. So we've set up this template now, and we're going to take it forward to actually create a contract from that template.
Yeah. So one of the other pain points you addressed, Richard, was that we try to use a conversational Q&A. And what that actually means is that we really believe that contracts should be something more human. They're not created from lawyers for lawyers, but we believe that everybody in the business that gets in touch with contracts should be able to create them in a delightful manner, in a quick manner, and without the hassle of having to deal with lots of legal language. So for an example, we can just choose this NDA that we've just set up. And one of the great things we have here, we're going to use Coca-Cola for an example. And as a legal person, I don't even have to look for the exact legal name of that company. I can just get that right from Companies House integration in Juro, and then all that key data is set up for me. So as I go through this Q&A and get asked these questions, I always have help text that kind of helps me decide what I need to fill in. And as you can see from a Companies House integration, you can see that all of these fields have now been pre-filled with the correct information as they show in Companies House. So I do not have to worry that I'm not using the right data. And this is just a really quick way to getting that contract set up. Especially for dates, you get this like pop-up calendar that you can configure your smart fields to be. And that's a great way for your team to just really quickly get these dates into the contract. And then once we finish this Q&A, you saw it, that didn't even take a minute. You can just see that all of these green fields, the smart fields we were talking about earlier, are now populated with that information that we just filled in. And I actually only had to fill in a date from a calendar and the beginning of a name, and my whole contract has already been created. So that's just a super quick way and a more delightful manner for your team to create contracts.
And just to pick up on that integration piece, so we support integrations with tools like Salesforce, Slack, Greenhouse, and we have an API, but the one we had a look at here was Companies House. So why as a lawyer is it important that the correct company name is there? Isn't this just about going and getting a contract closed?
It is, but we also need to make sure that our data is correct in order to actually have a legally valid contract. And this also improves the adoption across the team. So by using these integrations, we make sure that our team can quickly set up the correct contract, and they just really enjoy this like conversational Q&A that requires very little effort. And we really see like high adoption rates across business teams because of this.
And Emily, I know often you're using our Salesforce integration to push out contracts, and we have a separate webinar recording on our YouTube channel about that. But in this case of that Q&A flow, how does that enable you as a salesperson?
Yeah, well, it just makes it really quick and easy to populate the contract error-free, and I'm being guided to answer specific fields. So there's really no ambiguity around, have I missed anything on the contract? Is there anything that I'm going to have to go back and redo once I've already had the contract signed because I missed a field somewhere?
Cool. And so I mean, we've now got this contract set up. So we've created the template. We have clients who will sign thousands of contracts from a specific template. It's now being created. What happens next, Josephine?
So what usually happens next is that we start to collaborate, first of all, internally. So we really want to make sure that this agreement is exactly as it should be. And anybody from your team that has access to this workspace and to that contract can then collaborate with you on that contract. So for example, if I were to just include a new clause right now here, then this would not only show in the contract, as you can see, but it would also create a new version. So what we mean by version is really, if we click on this first one here, this is the contract we just created after the Q&A. But afterwards, I also included this new clause. So I can just really easily keep track of any changes that have been made within my contract. Same if somebody deletes something, I always have access to that. And this is just a really quick way of making sure all the activities I have are stored, and I always know what's going on with my contract. As you can see now, this is just my name, but I can also go in and just rename it if I'd like, and I could go and check if everything's correct.
And what happens, I mean, if you're actually deleting text, what does that look like?
Okay, so let's try that out. Let's say we no longer need clause 2 here. So we're just gonna go ahead and delete that now. And then we go back in, and after a quick refresh, we will see now that we actually get this red line right here. So it's a super easy way to also go back to older versions and make sure what you actually want in the contract is agreed. And this is also a great way for legal teams to keep track of all the changes that have been made to their templates. So they always know what the contract contains. They don't have to go through the whole contract and find those little pieces of information. And another great tool for collaboration, I just wanted to show you quickly, is our activity board. So you can always see who has viewed the contract, edited the contract, etc. So here we can see that Tom, one of our members of our workspace, has just viewed the contract, and then if he would have, and then I edited it. So you can always keep track of that whole audit trail of information. And the next thing I wanted to show you is that all that information that is in your contracts is searchable. So for example, if I just type in Warner Yard, I can see that although I will get all the information that contains Warner from my library of contracts right here. So all that information that we just filled in is also searchable, which also helps collaboration if you're trying to find a specific information about one contract and you can't really remember who it's with. Okay, so as a next step, I think it would be great to show you the approvals. So approvals was a really big feature that we really wanted to show our team. And we're just gonna show you really quickly how that would look like.
And just to understand on the approval side, I mean, Emily, from a sales perspective, I mean, we have this process internally, we're getting approvals. How have you found that interacting with your sale? I mean, does this just delay things, or how does this look in practice?
Yeah, so just in terms of having the approval workflow built into the platform, it's a lot easier having it this way rather than just getting a verbal yes from someone or getting a yes in an email. Emails get deleted by accident, and sometimes when you're trying to get that verbal yes, you're trying to catch someone in between a meeting, and that can take a lot of time. So this is just putting a process in place where you're requesting a signature from requesting an approval from someone. That notification gets sent directly to that person, and then when they have a couple of seconds, they can review the contract, make sure it's okay, and then give you the approval that you need.
And it's been interesting, hasn't it, learning a little bit about the pain points, not just from a sales perspective, but also from the perspective of the approver. So kind of from a legal team's perspective, I mean, especially if you're needing to approve tens of contracts a month, how does that help you, Josie?
Well, it really helps to always be notified in different ways that I need to approve, and you just keep on top of your to-do list within your contract workspace to have it all in one system. So for example, if I go back, I can now see that this has been sent for approval, and this is just a super helpful way to kind of keep track of the status of where the contract's at.
Cool. So are we going to have a quick look at the how approvals would look for the other party?
Yeah, let's do that.
So I think if we just have a quick look at this link here, so there's different ways the approver is going to get sent this document. One thing we're really big on at Juro is links, and so those links will enable the approver essentially to see an approval screen, as we call it. So if we basically paste this directly into the document here, we'll be able to see, let's say someone has sent me, or Emily has sent me a document to approve. What I see as an approver generally in the business is a screen that will allow me to do multiple things. Internally comment, approve and reject contracts. And so we're going to have a look at this one. Let's say we are going to reject it. In fact, no, on second thoughts, let's approve it. So we're going to hit approve. And then once that document is approved, you're going to be notified of it. So let's just post a message here, and we can just say to our team, approved, thanks for your help. So that's now been approved from my side, Josie. So we'll go back into your Juro environment, and if we refresh the screen, let's see what the next steps are going to be.
Yeah, so we can actually go into Activity Board and just kind of see what has happened to our contract since we started creating it. So we can see that now it has been approved, and that Richard also left a comment. And this is just a super useful feature where you can just get your comments directly. You're notified by them by email or through our integration with Slack. And then you always know what's happening with your contract, and you can also answer that comment. And then if we go back into our contracts, we can now see that the status has changed from sent for approval to approved.
So I think we've now got to the stage where we've created the contract, we've had some internal collaboration on it, We've had the contract formally approved by a decision maker. What happens next?
I think it's time to just send that out for signing. So let's just type in any type of email address. And then there's also two ways of sending that out. So you can either hit send for signing here, and then you can have a private message for your counterparty and just send that off. Or like Richard said, we always have links, and this is just a super helpful tool if you'd like to keep everything in the same email chain. So you just copy this link, and I'm going to show you what that looks like from a counterparty perspective. So the counterparty will then receive this link, and once they click on it, they're asked to fill in their name. And this will then show the name in the signatory block for us to make sure that always the right entity is actually signing that name and the right person that we want to agree with.
So right now what's happening is they're confirming the details right through this Q&A.
Exactly.
And that's optional.
Exactly. So we set it up in a way that the counterparty is able to just confirm their own details about their own company. And this is the same information as we've seen before that we scraped from Companies House, but this is completely optional. If you want to fill in all that information yourself and you don't want the counterparty to answer, then you don't have to set it up this way. We just kind of wanted to show you what that could look like if you'd like to collect information from the other side. And this is the screen that they would see when they get a signing link. And the really cool thing about our custom built editor is that it's web-based. So for example, if I scroll this window down, let's say to the size of my phone, I can just see that it adapts just like any other website. I can fully view the contract without any issues. The whole text looks nice and clean, and I can just sign it right from my device. So it actually tells me it's so small, like a phone, that I would have to turn it horizontally to sign. So you can actually sign this from a phone, from your iPad, any way you want. So just to show you how that would look like, you just go ahead and then you just sign your name like very intuitively, either with your finger on a touch screen or just with your mouse pad, and then this contract is signed and you get this message.
And what happens during that process if you get comments on the document? What does that process look like? Maybe we can just duplicate this one and have a look just on the off chance it wasn't actually signed. And just whilst we're getting to that point, I think one thing we've been very surprised at Juro is just the proportion of people who will sign on mobile. It's around 30% of contracts being signed on a mobile device, and that's increasing all the time. So maybe a question for Emily. I mean, why do you think it's important to deliver that kind of experience for your customer?
Well, I mean, this is probably my favorite feature in Juro, just because it actually helps you to close much faster. I find it's happened to me too many times where a contract has been delayed coming back just because the person who was signing the contract was traveling or something. They were just out of the office, and so they didn't have access to their computer. And nowadays, like, not that many people have printers in their homes. They only have printers at their houses. So this ability to sign on a mobile device or an iPad or something like that just completely eliminates that whole problem.
Yeah, exactly. So we really seen like a great adoption and great feedback even for that whole experience that our customers tell us. Their customers are actually really delighted about this feature, being able to sign that contract from wherever they are. And just to get back to your question, Richard, so what happens if there's something in the contract that your counterparty doesn't agree with? Well, we can just let our counterparty comment on our contract. So if they would say, I don't agree to clause 2, for example, they can just send this off and we will be notified right away as we were via approvals. So this is just a very easy way to kind of keep track.
And those notifications can come in a couple of ways, right? So they can come typically via email is the most common method, but we also have our Slack integration as well. So we should be able to see now, if we go into our Slack workspace, we can start to see, well, here is the internal comment coming in from me. So this is the unhelpful CEO who's blocking a sale and eventually coming back through to it by approving. And we can now see some external comments. So what we will often have with legal teams is a shared legal channel where rather than getting just endless emails coming in, if you have Slack already set up, it's a few minutes to set up this integration, and people tend to find that really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it's really great if teams can just stay with the tools they already have adapted well in the company, just get notified in various ways. So they can always be sure, I'll get this. This is not yet another tool where I always have to log in and check my status, but it just works with me. It works the way that works best for me.
And Emily, I mean, we're kind of getting to the end of that signing process. So just to understand from your perspective, let's say you've gone and signed a deal. Have you had cases where actually you've seen delay because an authorized signatory has just taken time to actually sign?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And is that, I mean, typically in your experience, are you seeing a signatory, an authorized signatory internally sign before or after the customer, or does it depend really?
It's really, it depends. In cases of an order form, sometimes the signatory wants to sign afterwards just to make sure everything has really been negotiated out, and then we're signing really the final agreement. In the case of something like an NDA, sometimes it's happened before where we've had contracts go out that are pre-signed.
So if we just want to sign this contract now ourselves, we can just show you very quickly what that would look like. So you can choose from your group of authorized signatories who should be able to sign this contract. So I'm just gonna choose myself for the purposes of this demonstration. And you can see that since I've signed something before under my name, my signature actually gets it gets saved. So I have the opportunity to just start over and draw my signature again, but it's literally a 2-click signing experience if I just want to keep that signature as it is. So if I go ahead and sign, we can then see that our contract is signed. And
it's kind of an interesting example, isn't it, Josephine, where this idea of authorized signatory may not be of huge importance to sales who have different set of incentives, but why is it important from a legal perspective?
It's important from a legal perspective simply because we want a legally binding contract. So we really have to make sure that the correct people are actually signing that agreement.
So it makes total sense. And we've kind of come through that contract life cycle here. So just to go back into the core dashboard here to give a little bit of clarity. So this is an environment which you would see typically as someone who's created the contract. This is obviously going to look a little bit different depending on who you are. If you're an authorized signatory, if you're a legal counsel, for example. So we've actually had quite a few questions come in. So I think we're going to move into some of those questions, which are all kind of product related, and we'll jump into the various, maybe try and show some of these things. So the first question we've got is, do clause references get updated automatically when you add or delete clauses? So the answer to that is yes. So let's just show that quickly. So we're just going to create a new version of this NDA by duplicating it. So I think a really interesting part of the Juro kind of experience is the editor we've built. And the editor is designed specifically for contracts. So we're just adding a new clause here. And you can see that numbering is also updated. But as lawyers, we know that contract numbering is not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you then hit tab, you're going to see that go into a subclause. And then from there, you're going to add another subclause. And then maybe actually this is a subclause. And so you can basically build in that auto numbering. And this is kind of functionality that sort of Microsoft Word will have, but it has all sorts of things that actually you don't need or don't want in contracts. And so the way in which this editor is built basically implies that you can do a few things. So if we click on this button here, we might want to, for example, add a table. So contracts have tables, and we know, for example, that they also may need an extra row or an extra column to be added into that type of table during the negotiation process. I think the advantage of this is that because you have an in-browser editor, if, for example, you want to push some new data from Salesforce to say, well, in this sales contract, we're selling 3 products instead of the usual 2, well, you're not just filling in the gaps with little pictures of text, it's actual text in the document. And actually, the table will respond to that instruction. So every time you're getting a correct, neat document, not just a static PDF with things kind of pasted into it.
Yeah, and we've really seen great adoption from our customers that do use the Salesforce integration about these dynamic tables that Richard mentioned, that roles just get added or excluded automatically, which just makes it so much easier to set up contracts. You no longer have to edit them after you've pushed that information through to Juro.
Cool. So the next question we've got is, what is the analytics tab for? So let's have a quick look. So this contract has now been pushed through the Juro system. So we've taken it all the way through that contract lifecycle, and we've seen all these approvals. So there's a few ways in which we can track that data. Analytics and activity typically sit together. So what activity is going to enable you to do, especially for legal teams, is have a complete audit trail of all of the activity that's happened on contracts in your organization. So if we take a specific example of comments and we have a look at, for example, Josephine as a user, then we're tracking here. Oh, this is a different Josephine, I think. Let's have a look at it. Here we are. Yes. So Josephine, you can see a couple of comments coming in here, and this is all tracked for you. So if you imagine in organizations, some of our customers sign 10,000 contracts through Juro, you have an awful lot of activity data, and this is all collected for you in this permanent audit trail here. And so from a compliance perspective, by investing in a system of record, whether it's Juro or something else, you have all that data in one place. To the question of analytics, so analytics can do a few different things, actually. So if we have a look here, we'll just switch to another workspace with a bit more data. So we'll have a look at this demo workspace, for example, where we've got a few more contracts coming in. So one of the things we're really big on is turning data in contracts from an unstructured format with emails and kind of chaotic template management into a workflow. And because we've gone through that system in the way we've just showed you, you can see in analytics here some peaks and troughs of contract activity. So it might be something very basic, like how many contracts have you created, sent, and signed during a certain period. And so what that's going to enable you to do is, maybe let's have a look at October, and we can just have a look at what that contract pattern was. So during October, we can tell you instantly that there were 90 contracts created, 27 signing and 24 signed. This tells us a few things. One, it tells us there's a lot of work in progress, and actually maybe there's some bottlenecks in the process to be identified. Two, it shows the peaks and troughs. So sometimes our clients will see towards the end of a quarter actually a huge kind of surge in legal review time, and that will help our general counsel customers to resource the legal team. And alongside this, we have a natural language processing enabled query tool, which will enable you to see, for example, how long is it taking the organization to sign a contract? Or you can ask Juro questions like, for example, how long is it taking the legal team to review a contract? And what this is giving people, often for the first time, is a dashboard they can use to guide the team's behavior. And if they need to kind of dig further into that, so from a resourcing perspective, we can have a look at the activity of the team. So we can see, for example, who's actually dealing with the most number of contracts and how long they're taking to process them. So if we have a look at Emily, well, Emily is doing a lot of the work here. If we have a look at me somewhere down here, well, I'm not doing very much, and it's taking me quite a lot more time. So these sort of data points are really important. And then the final thing is that you can always export this data. So if we just hit export to CSV, you can conduct a contract audit through Juro. And this is just another way in which you can go and scale that workflow by exporting that data. Okay, so I think the next question we've got is, what integrations do you have? So we'll have a look at these, and then let's maybe have a quick discussion on why we think they're valuable. So the integration stack at Juro is ever expanding. Currently we have 5 supported integrations, which means they're just click and connect type integrations. And we also have an API, which around half of our customers will use to connect Juro to different systems. So I think we take them maybe in order. So from Google Drive perspective, you sign a contract, it's fully signed as a PDF, and it gets pushed automatically into a G Drive folder. I mean, Josephine, from the perspective of a legal team, if you're using something like Google Drive for document storage, why does that matter? Why is that important?
Well, it's great. It is of great importance for the legal team and all teams, because the legal team can be sure that every fully signed contract gets automatically uploaded as PDF to that G Drive. So they no longer have to worry that their teams forget to upload the signed contract. They can be sure everything is in one place. Everything is always up to date. So all of your contracts are stored on the G Drive, where you can also view them, not just in Juro, and be sure just you have the control of all those contracts without having to make sure your teams are actually manually uploading them. So it cuts down on time and you have more control.
And I think you get some continuity there. And I think this idea of business continuity is very interesting. So the next one we have is Slack. So Emily, I mean, from a sales perspective, what do you see from the Slack integration? How does that help you?
Well, it just helps us to identify really quickly if there's comments being made on a contract. So you don't have to wait for something to come in over email or for someone to call you or to chase a prospect. If they make a comment on the contract, it gets sent directly into our Slack channel, which is amazing. And then in the latter part of that whole process, when someone's signing the contract, it's really fun. You can get the whole team involved. We have a little message in our own Juro sales channel when someone signs an agreement, and then everyone kind of congratulates the salesperson using these emojis as Richard is showing on the screen now. So it's really fun.
It's a nice example, isn't it, of something that actually gives utility. So it is useful as cutting down on emails. If some of our customers cutting down on 5,000 emails, for example, but also there's a slight human element of bringing in that enablement from legal into the business and seeing some level of celebration.
Yeah, and it just really creates a great relationship between teams. So it's actually delightful and fun to create a contract because you get feedback from your team. Everybody can see that you've just created and signed that contract, and they can congratulate you, they can communicate, and it's a very positive kind of engagement between legal and business.
You heard it here first. Fun to create a contract. Okay, so we'll have a look at these other couple of integrations. So Salesforce is a really kind of core part to the Juro platform. So as I say, we have a completely separate recorded webinar on this on our YouTube channel, which you can have a look at. I think Salesforce is a great example of a tool which is entirely lived in by a sales team. So, I mean, what proportion of your day, Emily, would you say you actually spend in Salesforce?
Probably about 80%.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, I think traditionally in contract management, what you've had is a tool being bought by a general counsel. You send an email to the VP sales and say, good news, we've got this new tool. And the VP sales will often say, well, we've got a lot of tools already. So via the Juro Salesforce native app, essentially you can create contracts, monitor them, and actually agree them from within Salesforce. And by agreeing them within Salesforce, you're getting much more engagement from the business. And of course, in the same way with Google Drive, once you've got a fully signed doc, that can just get uploaded back into Salesforce. So there's no kind of chasing to be done. And Josie, why do you think from a legal perspective, obviously it's not really a legal tool, Salesforce, but why is that interaction between the two tools important?
Yeah, but as a legal person, it's always important that your team actually adopts the tools that you buy and actually uses those platforms. So just seeing greater adoption by using Salesforce for your contracts, just really make sure that people are using the correct templates and they're not going back to searching Word documents and sending out those, but they're actually happy to use that new tool that just makes it quicker for them.
And I think when we were looking at the templates dashboard earlier, so these contracts templates will be obviously live synced with those tools. So if you imagine, for example, GDPR comes in and you want to go and click on a Juro template as legal counsel, you want to go and amend some text. You basically come in here, amend text, publish a new version, and that goes live for the organization. So if it's being created via the contract Q&A, well, it will be the correct version, but it will also be the correct version if it's created from Salesforce. And so that kind of interaction of emailing a sales team and saying, our terms have changed, here's a new version, that just doesn't happen anymore. And we think that's of mutual benefit to both teams. So The final integration we've got here is Companies House. So we've actually showed that working in practice. I think this is a really nice example of taking data which just exists elsewhere. We have examples of tens of thousands of contracts being created by clients where they previously had to look up those details. And I think lawyers getting hundreds of emails saying, is it Juro Limited, Juro Inc., Juro Online Limited? Who is the company? So we had a client, in fact, who's got a poster on their wall, which actually has the company details of the client in question, because that became so painful. And I think that the final thing is the Juro API. So when we talk about scaling workflow, this is really, really important for us. This is something which it's obviously hard to demo because it's really a technical point, but essentially the value of this is that you can connect Juro to any of your systems. So examples of that are in client onboarding flows in mobile apps. You're asking 2 or 3 questions. What's your name? What's your address? Which plan are you on? And then there's a separate contract process. What Juro will enable you to do is take that data during the onboarding flow, generate a contract instantly, which is displayed in the app, take a signature of it, and then so that white label experience is actually nothing to do with the Juro user interface. You would think it was part of your own application. But the important thing for legal teams is when you come back into the Juro workspace, you can see a clear audit trail of everything that's happened, and you've got a record that is searchable. So we're going to end on that note. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend this webinar. As we said, the webinar has been recorded. A link is going to be sent out along with the slides. Hopefully one of the messages we've got across is Juro is a way to create not just more efficient legal process, but to scale legal process and to create a better interaction between legal and the business.